Hey guys, welcome back to Psychic Celluloid Signals. Today I'm at the Dryden Theatre and I'm seeing one of my all-time favorite films. It's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it is directed by the recently deceased Milos Forman, so that'll be really kind of special to see this on 35mm. It'll be my first time seeing it in a theater, so that's really awesome, and let's go check it out, and I'll tell you how it is on the big screen. Alright guys, I just got done seeing one of my all-time favorite films at the Dryden, based on one of my all-time favorite books, and that is, of course, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Just a little background that I know because of my interest in the source material. I have done a little research in the past. The novel is by Ken Kesey, who is probably as well known, I guess, for writing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as he is for his influence in the kind of psychedelic 60s, 70s hippie movement, in which him and his merry pranksters went around and did the infamous acid tests. So there's a little background on the author. He also, in doing all this stuff, really helped to launch the career of the Grateful Dead. So that's, I guess, another interesting connection to the author that I don't know as many people who are, especially people who are just into the film, who don't really know much about the source material, might not know all of this about where this book came from. But to dive a little bit further into where the inspiration for the source material came, it also connects with all of what I just mentioned, because back when Project MKUltra was going on, Ken Kesey signed up to be essentially a human lab rat, in which they tested various substances on him, including like LSD and other like strange classified things on him, just to see how they worked out, right? But while he was doing this, not only did he get an interest for what led to like the acid tests and what have you, but more importantly, in the case of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he was being tested in, and I can't remember what hospital, but it was a hospital that was he was around a lot of people who were institutionalized for mental health issues, and I think while he was there, he really got to like empathize with these people, and didn't see them as like he saw them as very human, and very normal. They just had their own like quirks or issues and stuff like that, but he didn't see them as like raving madmen. They were just people who had issues that for whatever reason, either personal or just excuse me, or just like modern medicine just couldn't handle at that present time, or maybe even wouldn't be able to now. So I guess he just saw people who were sick, but not people who were like inherently loony or anything like that, which is kind of a nice thing to note. And a little bit more background. The film itself is directed by Milos Forman, who is a Czechoslovakian director, came to the United States and became pretty widely known in the States, not only for directing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but also the critically acclaimed Amadeus, among other really well received films that he did here. So that's interesting, and of course, the for those of you who aren't aware, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest won the Big Five Academy Awards, which are the biggest sought out Academy Awards. Trying to remember what they all are off the top of my head. I know it's director, actor, actress, screenplay, and there's definitely one other that someone will probably comment in the comments below. But it did win the Big Five. It was one of three films in the history of the Academy to win the Big Five, the most recent one being Silence of the Lambs. So there's a little bit of background on the film. Diving right into the film, this film has a star-studded cast, but they weren't quite what you would have called a star-studded cast back in the day. A lot of them were new talent, or newer. They weren't like in the limelight as a lot of these actors in the film are today. I'll just go through a few. Of course, everyone is familiar with Jack Nicholson, and Louise Fletcher really kind of made a splash in this film. In these two roles, and I'm fairly certain that I read somewhere that Kesey did not like the casting of Nicholson for McMurphy, but I can't see this film without either Nicholson or Fletcher. This film just, it really hangs on those two characters. They really drive the film all the way through, and without McMurphy and Nurse Ratched as his like excellent foil, I can't see this film as having turned out as spectacular as it did. But some other people who were in this film that many of you viewers might be aware of in other roles. Will Sampson, he played the chief in the film, and he was in many films, including Poltergeist 2, for instance, so you guys might recognize him from there. Christopher Lloyd, of course, is the famous Doc Brown, and I remember I went and saw this with my mom, and we were just remarking on how young all of these actors look. Like, you know what Doc Brown looks like in Back to the Future. I'm sure most of you who've seen it. And how he looks in this film. He looks so much younger. It's just crazy seeing this film and seeing all these actors. Another one who is so young, like he's almost unnoticeable. I remember when I saw this film the first time, I didn't recognize that it was Danny DeVito playing Martini. And in fact, it is. And of course, he's gone on to do, tons of things. Most recently, well, one of the most recent is, of course, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but he's been in so many other films and television shows that I could spend a half hour just listing it all. But yeah, he looks so young in this film. And an interesting little tidbit we heard before the film, apparently he'd just gotten married when they were making this film, and as a result of his separation from his wife for long periods of time while making the film, he sort of developed a invisible friend to it sort of comforted him or something, which is very interesting. especially obviously given the subject matter of the film. Um, Fortunately, it seems like Danny DeVito is, I don't know if I'd say normal, but he seems quite well adjusted from like interviews and what have you that I've seen of him as of recent. So, at any rate, Vincent Schiavelli. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's been in a lot of things as well. I really loved his role in Better Off Dead. That's a film. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend checking that one out. And he plays a teacher, I believe, the math teacher, and it's not a huge role, but it's pretty hilarious. And he's been in other things too. And then, of course, as a ton of you horror fans out there will recognize him seeing this film instantly. Michael Berryman, of course, who famously was in The Hills Have Eyes, among the many other films that he's been in, and he's just a fantastic actor. And though his role is pretty minor in this film, I think he does a fantastic job at what he does. So all in all, like, everyone in this film just gave 110%, and they were beyond impressive in how they made this film real. Um, so I guess another thing we can talk about is the setting and the sort of the cinematography as well. It looks very realistic for a simple reason, because they shot it at Oregon State Hospital. So it looks realistic because they're in a hospital, and the shots just really take advantage of seeing all the like walls that are all white, and um, the like chains and bars on the walls, and the windows and what have you. It really does a fantastic job of showing you what it looks like inside of this place, and it's really a kind of hopeless feeling place. The only like hope in this film comes from like what Nicholson's character McMurphy brings into it, and shares with the rest of the characters. But the setting itself is just so bleak and empty. Um, it's kind of almost absurd when the scene where uh, Nurse Ratched is explaining the music and why it has to be turned up so high so that these older people who can't hear can enjoy something. Meanwhile, like, there's no like art on the walls. It doesn't seem like there's all that much actually to do in this place. So it's like she's really, like, you can tell in that point that she's full of crap. Because if they really, really wanted to reach out to these people who could hardly hear, give them some art, give them some like puzzles or something to entertain themselves and be visually engaged if they can't be so much auditorily engaged. So yeah, just the setting plus the plot and the dialogue of the film work really well in that instance, and really in most every other instance. But I guess other than that, uh, overall it was just a incredible experience to see this film on 35 millimeter. As I mentioned before, it's one of my all-time favorite films, and based on one of my all-time favorite books. So seeing it properly projected on 35 millimeter at the Dryden was amazing. And I guess I'll talk a little bit about the alterations to the source material, which is, I think, a little bit of an interesting thing to look at always. I know when I want to say I saw the film first and then I read the book, and I was very surprised at the point of view, because in the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it really is from the point of view of McMurphy, whereas in the book, the entire book takes place through the chief's point of view. And he focuses a lot on McMurphy because he sees him as this this big character, I think, as he puts it. But the point of view is from the chief's point of view, and it becomes apparent really early on that the chief, though it can be argued whether or not him or any of the characters belong in this place, it's definitely apparent that he has some cognitive abnormalities. He seems to maybe be perhaps on the schizophrenic spectrum or something to that extent. It's hard to say. Obviously, it's hard to really diagnose a character unless it's the character's diagnosed for you. But another thing is that I just thought of looking at the title of the book is it's never explained what One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest means. Like the term is never brought up in the film, which is kind of interesting. The title obviously still fits. It feels right with the film. But I believe the chief explains a Native American saying or something that his father said. It's been a little while since I've read the book, but it regards the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And that's another interesting juxtaposition. And there's a lot of things, like specific things that happen in the book that don't happen in the film, or vice versa. Like, I know there's more, I think, kind of tragic occurrences, I'll say, without spoiling much, that occur in the book than in the film, although, of course, there is a huge amount of tragedy in the film as well. I think there's more peppered in the book, which I think ultimately that just didn't translate well to the way that film works out and how you watch film and experience it. It's sort of like a whole roller coaster ride as opposed to a book that can jump all over the place, and it just different mediums, So I guess there's there's a lot that's different between the two, but I personally feel like the film captures the essence, or at least what I found to be the essence of the book, which is just these people aren't raving madmen. They're people. They have issues, but they're individuals, and they should be treated like people as opposed to lunatics who should be locked up and never let out because they're a menace to society or something ridiculous like that. So I feel like both stories tell it really well, and I always just love seeing it played out by actors, and there's no better way to do that than to see it on 35 millimeter at the theater. So before I end, I will give a huge thanks to the Dryden Theatre for putting this on, and for their entire After Bedlam series. Glenn and I tried to see as many films in the series as we could. We got to see 3, so we're really excited that we got to see what we got to see. and they were all fantastic. So we just look forward to the future of what we'll be playing. And with that, I say keep it psychic and keep it real, guys.